Check, y'all. All right, we should be good. All right, what's up, y'all? What's going on? Let's go. Let me make sure this is good. We should be coming through. I keep getting an error on my end, so if anything goes wrong, it should be all right. What's up, y'all? How's it going today? Let me just check real quick, make sure we're good. What's up, y'all? Yep. All right, good. I'm coming through. All right. So today we're covering The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton, and this is a little different for us in terms of content, but we're covering literature here. So I just somebody suggested this to me. So shouts out to the suggester out there, and I'm really glad that I picked it back up and read it because it's a profound work, and I'm sure probably everybody here has read the book. If you haven't, then this will be a good first time experience with S.E. Hinton's The Outsiders. And you probably read it as a youth. But it's I gotta say, picking it back up as a grown-A person, it's really profound. It hit me pretty hard. And it's okay, so what's The Outsiders about? Let's get into what the book's about before I start rambling about it. So I'm going to basically go over the narrative, talk about a general overview of the plot, what the book's about, when it took place, when the book was published, and we're going to talk about all sorts of things. We're going to discuss the Greasers, right, and their worldview. We're going to talk about what the title means, being an outsider, and why the book is so profound, and what the book means. And we're going to dive into some excerpts from the text and discuss some of the dialectics within the text, because it's pretty important. So, I think that we're going to get into some material that obviously you wouldn't have when you first read it, and that's one reason why the book works, because it works as both a face value surface teenage YA novel, but it's so much more than that. And I'm kind of questioning where to start, because it honestly, literature is supposed to do this to you, right? It's supposed to be meaningful and hit you on a personal level, but also you're supposed, you need to be able to look at things objectively. But I got to say that reading the book, like, it took me a few days to process it, and it really did hit me. It hit me pretty hard because of some of the things that occur in the book. I mean, it is tragic. It's a tragic book, and especially dealing with the excellent character development. I mean, it gives me chills just to think about how well this book is put together, and the character development is so full in this. It is everything that a novel should be in a number of ways. And so let's talk about it. So the book was published in 1967, which is probably a surprise to some people. I mean, you think of it as the ultimate 50s book, right? And it is. It's a 50s book, but it was published in 1967. And then, of course, the movie took place was filmed in 1983, Francis Ford Coppola. We're not going to be talking so much about the film because I didn't even want to rewatch the film this time. I wanted to just stick to the text, and the film is a faithful adaptation of the book, but it's one of those things where it's interesting that, like, the way that nostalgia works. It's like, for some reason, do you remember in the 80s, if you were alive, do you remember in the 80s, like, how the 50s was so popular in the 80s, right? There was, like, a huge resurgence of 50s culture in the 80s. Kind of like that sort of happened with the 60s and the 90s. And so, I mean, these things kind of go in cycles. But what's interesting is that that's not really the interesting part. The interesting part is that the book is relevant now, and all of the things in the book, the names have changed, but the depth of the novel and the way that the characters interact is universal and is still really relevant today. I mean, it doesn't change. So let me turn on my light here. It's a little dark. There we go. That's a little better. That's a little better. I've been sitting in darkness. So I maybe it's just me. I'm sure it's not just me. I mean, that's why one reason why the book is so popular and has never gone out of print. But I really feel for these characters, and I find a lot of I can relate to them in a number of different ways because and really anybody, I'm sure anybody can. But being a teenager once myself, as everyone was, I can really relate to the way that the characters feel, especially the speaker in the book, Ponyboy, is so relatable to me, and the things that he and his friends go through, it really, really hit me hard. So I'm gonna try to lay off that a little bit, but it's a really emotional book. So let's talk about it. So, did you know that S.E. Hinton was a woman? No, everybody knows that. Everybody knows S.E. Hinton is a lady. But what you may not know is that she wrote the book when she was 15 years old. And that is really incredible to me because the writing is achieves something that most adults writing in the voice of a teenager cannot achieve. Some people can. I mean, we've talked about James Joyce and Portrait of the Artist as a young man, and how he, achieves through his diction, he achieves the voice of a child. And maybe, with Rimbaud, I mean, Rimbaud wrote when he was a teenager, though, but it's pretty unique because there's such a weird, like, logical distance for most people between when they were, a teenager and when they are grown up. And a lot of adults, we've talked about this before, but a lot of adults forget like what it was like to be a teenager. They know in their mind what it's like, but because of the passage of time, I think that they forget the visceral feelings of what it's like to be a teenager. And they start to grow into the mold of what adults do. And that's fine. That's healthy. I mean, that's what growing up is. But the reason that it impacts the reader so much, this novel, is that shouts out to Bruce Hornsby shouts out to Bruce Hornsby, right? Who's from my part of town. He went to my rival school. And anyway, somebody dropped Bruce Hornsby in the chat. Thanks, Kate. But where am I going with this? That S.E. Hinton was 15, published the book when she was 19, and it's not really important for the novel, but I'll just mention that the backstory is that she apparently wrote this after something similar happened in her life, and that of course the publishers asked her to change her change her name, or not to change her name, but just to use her initials because it would be more relatable since it was about boys. And it would put readers off in the initial printing and the initial publication if they saw it was written by a girl. So I get that. But the book sold out. It went through a few printings, and it's never gone out of print. It sells every year, and that's of course because of schools. Schools love this book, but it deserves it because it's a great book, and it has all of the things that. Probably most adult novels want to have, which is it's a kind of a unity in variety, which is one of the keys to great literature, right? Which is a combination of multiple characters, all with different backstories, who are united in one cause that is universal, right? One of those things that unites them is family, that they really have no family, or their families are terrible. And shouts out to Wes Lex, our homeboy out there. Good to see you. Good to see our homeboy, Wes Lexicon Media. And the other thing that I will say that what I take from the book is, again, something that we've seen in a lot of literature that we've covered, and that is the sort of unspoken sense of love in the sense that everybody wants to be loved. Everybody wants someone to love them. Everybody wants someone to love, but really they want someone to love them. And especially with these characters in the book, they want to be loved so badly. And at one point they say, a character says, "Ponyboy, you're living in a vacuum." That's incredibly complex. I mean, that statement alone is really complex, especially for a young adult, a young adult novel. What does it mean? Well, we'll get to that. But their whole lives are living in this vacuum where the circumstances of life and society and the societal lines are drawn really clearly in this book, which I appreciate. But, it's a dialectic, but it does make sense in a number of ways. And it's like you just take the names out and put in different names. And the characters have to learn how to deal with that. But they want to be loved, and they try so hardly, so hardly, that's not a word. They try so hard to prove themselves, but also to like find acceptance. And that's of course why it's called The Outsider, right? They represent the other in society. And Rimbaud said this, I is an other, right? And at one point, Ponyboy makes this statement that is so profound to me. He says that he lies all the time, but sometimes he doesn't believe me. And think of that statement. That's really, the fact that the speaker puts it back into the first person so that he doesn't even believe himself. But it's not that he doesn't believe himself, it's that he doesn't believe me. It makes it more personal than that. And I can understand that completely. I think all human beings can understand that in the way that we lie to ourselves in these little ways, but the little things with their lives become big things. So what's the book about? The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton. This is kind of a new edition of it. It's always getting a new edition, so it doesn't really matter. But what we have here is the book ends where it begins, in a sense, because it starts off by saying, let's see here. It says, "When I stepped out into the bright sunlight from the darkness of the movie house, I had only two things on my mind: Paul Newman and a ride home." Great first sentence. I was wishing I looked like Paul Newman. He looks tough and I don't. But I guess my own looks aren't so bad. I have light brown, almost red hair and greenish gray eyes. I wish they were more gray because I hate most guys that have green eyes, but I have to be content with what I have. My hair is longer than a lot of boys wear theirs, squared off in back and long at the front and sides, but I'm a greaser. And most of my neighborhood rarely bothers to get a haircut. Besides, I look better with long hair. So let me point out something really intelligent that the writer has done here. Okay. Now, if you're reading this book, this is one of the reasons why you're reading the book as like a seventh grader. The book appeals to you because the diction is so simple. It's in the present tense. It's straightforward, and the descriptions are pretty simple and they're easy to relate to, right? And whether you're, the style changes or not, in a sense, it doesn't, because we automatically get the contrast between the way other people are and the way that he is. We also get, we get a topical name. We get Paul Newman. And, a teenager reading this now has no idea who Paul Newman is, but that doesn't matter, because what matters is that we get the... All right, let's see if we're back. All right, give me a second here. We'll see if we're back. I got my reconnection, so hopefully we're right back, y'all. Wow. Computer totally crashed. Okay, good. We're back. All right, so that wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. All right, so apologies for that. Computer just shut down. Hopefully it won't happen again. But that's okay. It's Christmas coming up, so hopefully we'll have some new gear here. And listen, before I keep going, thanks, y'all. Thanks for sticking with me. Before I go on and continue that thought that I was on, if I can remember what I was talking about, let me give some shout outs out to some people. especially some people who need it right now. It's a tough time. It's a tough time of year, especially for some of our friends, and for a lot of people out there. It's also a wonderful time. It's a glorious time of year, obviously. But let me give a special shout out to. I'm not going to give any details or anything, obviously. But let me give a special shout out to our homeboy Jerry out there. We love you, Jerry. You are my homeboy, my brother, and I appreciate you. Shouts out to our homegirl, based homeschool mom, Rachel Wilson, Andrew Wilson, our homeboy, and the whole Wilson family. I love y'all. Everybody here loves you. We appreciate you. Shouts out to the people that have supported me, especially. Shouts out to my homeboy, Jethro. I love you. You're like my brother, and I appreciate you so much. And shouts out to all of our homies out there. Shouts out to Church of the Eternal Logos, David Patrick Harry, who always kills it. And you should see me on his channel this week. We'll be covering something cool. So I look forward to that. Shouts out to our homeboy JD out there, because I'll be on Jay's channel next week. So we're looking forward to that. Shouts out to Rachel and Jamie. We should see them together soon. Shouts out to Hasher and alternate current radio, and to West Lexicon Media, our homeboys out there, always putting out the most amazing content for years. I think we've all gotten so much from them. So thank you so much. And if you want to support me, please hit the like button, share the stream. You can also see the links in the description, in the channel description, and support me via PayPal, Cash App, Venmo. I really would appreciate it. I need it. We all need it. But I really could, man, I really could use the support right now. And you can also hit the super chat link, and I'll read your comments. Thank you to everybody who's here joining me. And also, Jay's got his big stream coming up tonight, so I'm sure I'll see everybody else there. So what I was talking about here was before the old computer crash there. Please support me, because that's one thing. Is that we were talking about the depths of the first paragraph, the opening paragraph of the book. We all know that the opening sentence and the opening paragraph of any novel is the linchpin, right? Sets the stage for the entire work. Well, this one, especially the entire first paragraph, is incredibly deep. The subtext here, and what we can get as adults, is that what you should understand is that we are being spoken to in a plain present tense. Most of the words are monosyllabic or disyllabic. The diction is incredibly simple. And first of all, that shows rather than tells. It shows us that the speaker is going to be a young person who doesn't have the vocabulary of a grown person yet. And that makes sense. But we also get the sense that the character thinks a lot about their appearance, and their appearance is kind of an outer reflection for how they feel on the inside, in terms of the fact that, number one, they are alone. This person is alone coming out of the movies, okay? And that obviously gives us the sort of a sense of the title, right? Being an outsider. They are also literally outside. But when he talks about how I am compared to other people, right, we automatically get the sense that that there is a marked difference between how this person feels and how he thinks other people feel. That's going to come out. Those feelings are going to be vindicated, obviously. But also, what's really intelligent about this is that you don't know when you're reading it that this reads like an assignment. It reads like almost like a book report or a personal essay, because that is exactly what it is. That's what the book is. Because the book ends where it begins. It ends with Ponyboy, skipping forward here to the end here. Ponyboy has gone through all of the things that he's gone through in his life, and his grades are suffering, and he has academic potential. He's going to be the person in their family who goes to college. It's that old story, right? Which is true. And that remains true to this day. I think a lot of people would be surprised to see, and not that one has to go to college or not. That's not the point. What one would be surprised to see how many how many how many times there are where a person goes to college now and they are still the first person who goes to college in their family. You might think that that's something from the 80s or the 90s, and that's or it's a cliche, but it's not. It's still absolutely true. And so his grades start slipping because of the we can just summarize it as saying the intense trauma that he goes through in the narrative. And he is given the opportunity to raise his grade, especially in his English class, by writing an essay. And he doesn't know what to write his essay about. He chooses a kind of a simple but pretty witty way of writing it at first. But then he decides to write his story, and that's what the book is. The book is a personal essay, right, of telling his life story. And this is way better than anything else that anyone else has submitted to raise their grade, especially in this person's class. You just know that. I mean, this is way better. And we can see from that Ponyboy is going to go on, hopefully, and to do something with his life. Who knows what that'll be, but the fact is that he will have a future. And that plays a major role in the way that the other characters look at their lives. They don't seem to, they don't have a future. They don't think about their futures, except for Ponyboy's eldest brother who raises him, Dally. Now, the other thing is that, it reads to me like, imagine yourself in, 6th or 7th grade, like writing a book report, and it will begin with the basic descriptions of characters. We always have, characters and setting, right? Those are like the two basic things. So we get those things right at the beginning, and it's funny how it goes from something so elementary or something so kind of not elementary per se, but really a teenage style of writing a basic book report into something so profound. So what he says next is, I had a long walk home and no company, but I usually loan it anyway for no reason except that I like to watch movies undisturbed so I can get into them and live them with the actors, which is interesting because that's what we're doing through the book. We are living the life of the characters in the novel. When I see a movie with someone, it's kind of uncomfortable, like having someone read your book over your shoulder. I'm different that way. I mean, and think of this, it's a 4-word sentence. I'm different that way. He already knows what he likes, what he wants, and he's brave enough to stick with it. I mean, did any of y'all ever go to films alone? And I know this is the 50s, but when you were in middle school, now, of course, I would never have done that. I mean, that would be weird. But I worked in a movie theater. It was my first job when I was a teenager. I worked in a movie theater, and then of course on our breaks, we would watch movies. I saw The Phantom Menace like 4 million times because of that. And then after that, I realized that going to the movies is not really a social activity because you can't talk, right? And you want to watch the movie, so that's when I was working in the movie theater, like, on a day off or something, I would go in and watch the movie. I could watch it early, I could watch it for free, and I'd go in and watch it by myself. But that's pretty cool that he is self-aware and self-assured like that. He says, I mean, my second oldest brother, Soda, who's 16 going on 17, never cracks a book at all. And my oldest brother, Daryl, who we call Derry, works too long. I think I said Dally a second ago. That's Dallas. That's a different character. Derry works too long and hard to be interested in a story or drawing a picture, so I'm not like them. And nobody in our gang digs movies and books the way I do. For a while there, I thought I was the only person in the world that did, so I loaned it. It's pretty cool. Now, we also get obligatory Jar Jar. Me don't like. No, I'm not going to do that. Me so like a go. No. So what we get here also is the family structure, and we get the differences within the family. Now, what we're going to learn here is that, and he's going to point out that Derry, his eldest brother, is like his mother because this boy, Pony Boy, he has no parents. His parents have died in a car accident, and it he was at the age where it has affected his. I mean, it would affect anybody's life, but it's affected his life in a way that he's not even able to see yet, but it's in a profound way, and it's affected his oldest brother probably the most because his oldest brother looks like his father, but acts like his mother, and then his second oldest brother, Soda, looks like his mother, but acts like his father, because Derry, the oldest brother, is always like worried about where he is, and the father figure kind of like is there to support him. That's the way that he feels about it. The way that he describes his brothers is amazing. He says, Soda tries to understand at least, which is more than Derry does, but then Soda's different from anybody. He understands everything almost. Like he's never hollering at me all the time like Derry is, or treating me as if I was 6 instead of 14. I love Soda more than I've ever loved anyone, even mom and dad. He's always happy-go-lucky and grinning, while Derry's hard and firm and rarely grins at all. But then Derry's gone through a lot in his 20 years, grown up too fast. Soda Pop will never grow up at all. I don't know which way's the best. I'll find out one of these days. It's amazing, because the book wasn't written by an adult looking back saying, oh, I'll find out one of these days. It's like, no, this is a real reflection of the way that the character thinks at the time, mirrored by the way that the author thinks, which is incredible. And to be self-aware enough to know that you're 13 or 14, and that your oldest brother, who's 20, has gone through a lot in their life is pretty profound to me. Anyway, I went on walking home thinking about the movie, and then suddenly wishing I had some company. Greasers can't walk alone too much or they'll get jumped, or someone will come by and scream greaser at them, which doesn't make you feel too hot, if you know what I mean. We get jumped by the sock. I'm just going to call them socks. I think it's become socks anyway, and they're usually called, it's short for social, right? He says, I'm not sure how you spell it, but it's the abbreviation for the socials, the jet set, the West Side rich kids. It's like the term greaser, which is used to class all us boys on the East Side. So the East Side boys are the poor boys, right? They're the down and outs. They're the greasers, and we're going to find that they're really the angels with dirty faces, right? Whereas the socias are the West End preppy kids who are privileged, and what that does is it like puts a dialectic between obviously the two kids from across the tracks, right? But the way that it's explained in the book is pretty awesome, because he says that really he'll come to a point where, let's see, he says this on page 38. He says, he's talking to Cherry Valance, who's the girl in the book. There's like one or two girls in the book. No, Cherry said slowly when I said this, it's not just money. Part of it is, but not all. You greasers have a different set of values. You're more emotional. We're sophisticated, cool, to the point of not feeling anything. Nothing is real with us. Sometimes I'll catch myself talking to a girlfriend and realize I don't mean half of what I'm saying. I don't really think a beer blast on the river bottom is super cool, but I'll rave about one to a girlfriend just to be saying something. She smiled at me. I never told anyone that. I think you're the first person I've ever really gotten through to. She was coming through to me all right, probably because I was a greaser and younger. She didn't have to keep her guard up with me. Also because he's intuitive. Rat race is a perfect name for it, she said. We're always going and going and going and never asking where. Did you ever hear of having more than you wanted, so that you couldn't want anything else and then started looking for something else to want? Seems like we're always searching for something to satisfy us and never finding it. Maybe if we could lose our cool, we could. That was the truth. Socias were always behind a wall of aloofness, careful not to let their real selves show through. When you read it, you want to say sock, because you kind of think of the misnomer of like the sock hop, right? And you think of like the 50s, but it's the socias, I guess. That's why we're separated, I said. It's not money, it's feeling. You don't feel anything, and we feel too violently. That's amazing. So, so let's unpack that for a second, you guys. What he's saying here is that the lower class kids, right, the greasers, live on emotion, and and that's interesting because there's going to be a that's going to kind of be inverted in a way because he lives on almost pure emotion, but he has logic and discernment where he can make decisions, even in his youth, and the the other characters in his gang, like, they run on pure emotion, but there are some who are like the socias who feel nothing because they felt too much at a young age and all of their feelings were exhausted. In other words, they were horribly mistreated by their family and at a young age, and so they've cried. He mentions at one point, like, they've cried all they can cry, and they have nothing left. So the rest of their life is being, like, hard and hard edged. Whereas the socias have no feelings because everything is beneath them, and they know that no matter what they're going to achieve, they're going to have everything laid out for them, and the most important thing is that no one ever says no to them. So they look for feeling through the activities that they do, which become more and more violent, and so nothing ever satisfies them. And this is a perfect kind of prism to look through a lens to look at society now in terms of the wide divides of what we see on a grand scale, which is, if we were going to look at the pyramidal structure and we were going to look at the elites, for instance, right? A lot of the things that we've heard about and that we've read and discussed so much, the degen activities, are because there's this kind of psychopathic, I don't know what you would call it. It's a psychotic, sort of psychopathic lack of feeling, which lets them dominate all the areas in society without having to feel any kind of sympathy or empathy for everyone beneath them. And we've talked about this in, what do we talk about this in? The Catcher in the Rye, Clockwork Orange, a bunch of the American Psycho. I mean, this is kind of what it's in a way, in an extreme way, this is what the prep school system, especially in England, sort of engenders, right? But what's interesting is that there's a vacuum, and that the two sides want what the other has, but not too much, if that makes sense. Of course, the greasers want the opportunities that the others have, and they want the structure, but they also are blessed with, like, being in touch with who they are and what they want on a day-to-day level. And it's also interesting that they are far more responsible than the socias. As somebody just pointed out. Oh, that was Kristen. Yeah, the socialites, the people of society have, right, who are supposed to be the responsible ones, but are far more irresponsible. I mean, think of Derry. Think of Derry, the big brother, who is 20 years old and is ice cold, has ice cold eyes, and is a kind of a father and mother figure in one, really. He's the big brother who has to raise his two siblings and works hard just to support his family, at times, so that they won't die. And that's far more responsible than anything that the other characters do, even though that's not, like, what society is telling them they want to do in terms of what they're expected to do, right? Let's see. What happens is, just as an overview in terms of the narrative, is Ponyboy, has his friends. There's a description of all the friends. They all have their different, they're in a gang. they're not in a pack. He differentiates the pack from the gang, and their enemy is basically the Socias, and they fight each other wherever they see each other, which is no different now than in terms of especially the urban warfare that goes on, probably all over the world, but especially this country, and especially in terms of people that where money and education and structure are lacking. But they are preyed upon by the Socias. And what happens is they get into these brawls, and then at one point, his friend Johnny has been injured, right, really badly. He was jumped by the Socias, and he was beaten up. So now he starts to carry a knife with him. He carries a blade, and it says that like he's so damaged, he's like a wounded animal, and he's never going to let anybody do that to him again. Well, one night he and Ponyboy are walking, and one of the guys grabs Ponyboy and is drowning him, and he passes out. And when he wakes up, the guy's dead, and he sees that his friend has killed him. So they go off and they find one of their other friends, and they ask what to do. Their friend, one of their friends is streetwise, and gives them a gun and some money and says, "Get out of town. We'll handle it. I won't tell anybody, of course." And that's another thing that like they can rely on their friends to be a vault, right? They know that when they tell secrets, their friends won't ever spill it. They're completely loyal to them, and he won't even tell his older brother where he is. And they get out of town, and they make their way to a church. They go out to the country, and they make their way to a church, and it's interesting, right, that they take sanctuary in the church. They have to change their identity. They cut each other's hair with a switchblade. Ponyboy dyes his hair blonde because they stick out so much. And then finally, one of their friends goes up and basically rescues him, says, "Here's some more money," takes him out, gets him something to eat, and they go driving around in his fast car. But then when they go back, the church is on fire. And it wasn't because of them. They didn't, leave. He was afraid that he would leave a cigarette burning, and that something would catch fire. But they find out that when they left, these little kids got into the church because it's an abandoned church. They get into the church and they accidentally started a fire, and they're all burning to death. Well, the two kids immediately run into the church selflessly, and they save all the little kids, and they come out in flames. And Ponyboy gets knocked out because his back is on fire, and he passes out, and Johnny, one of the rafters falls on him and breaks his back, and he's in bad shape, and they go to the hospital. Well, when they get to the hospital, then finally we see Ponyboy's two brothers, Soda and Derry, show up, and that's when we know. We already knew this as grown people, but we know that Derry he not only feels, but he feels more than any of the other characters because of his outpouring of love for his brother. And they get in, they want to go see Johnny, and the doctor won't let him because they're not family. And they explain that we're the closest thing to family that this guy's got. He's got parents, but they hate him. And if you let his mother in here, she's going to kill him. The thing she says to him, she's going to kill him. And so the doctor thankfully lets him in, and they see him. Well, then what happens is that at one point they see the mother. The mother has found out about this because all the newspapers have picked up the story about these heroic boys who are heroes. They're heroes. Everybody knows that they're heroes. And thankfully, this is in a world where, the press, is able to see through the fact that, like, these kids have some of them have criminal records. And they even find out that Johnny, the hero, the main hero, has killed somebody else. But what happens is the Socias are also human, and they admit in court that it was their fault and it was self-defense. And so the two boys are saved, and they're all exonerated of all their stuff. They get back to the hospital, and Johnny dies, and it's awful. And we all know his final words to Ponyboy, but he dies. But then they still have to fight for their honor. That's one of the things that is unspoken in the book, but it's because they're honorable. They have honor, and they have a code where they have to fight this group, because if they back down, if either side, they have a war council where the two sides, the two leaders of the two sides meet up with each other. Neither of them want to fight, but they decide that they have to fight anyway, because whoever backs down gets control of whatever. And they fight. And then, of course, they win. They win the fight. But when Johnny dies, one of the other characters goes like crazy, and we find out that he did love. He was capable of love, even though he was this hard, street kid who seemed to not care about anything, and he was always robbing and stealing and all this stuff. But he was just a kid, and that he loses his mind because Johnny's dead. He goes and he robs a store, and then he basically commits the big S by cop, and he gets shot. And then Ponyboy goes into a serious traumatic regression and refuses to believe that Johnny is dead at all, and he even takes the blame. He says, "No, Johnny didn't kill that kid. I killed him. I killed him." And he's sincere about that, but they're like, you didn't actually kill him. We know. The other side even admitted that you were knocked out and that they were going to kill you, and your friend killed him for you. So don't worry about that. And because of that, Ponyboy goes back to school. He can't sit through his classes. He's totally lost. But then he gets this redemption where he writes this paper, and that's the book, right? Yes, and it was Dally. Thank you, Toledo. It was Dally. And I think Dally in the movie is played by Matt Dillon. Again, I didn't go back and look at the film again, but Dally's played by Matt Dillon, who's perfect for this role, by the way. All the characters in the movie I know are pretty perfect for the role. I mean, Tom Coombe, right? Ralph Macchio is Johnny, who is seen as the, this kind of, he's like a, Johnny's thing is that he loves his gang because he's afraid to go home, because he has love from his gang, but he's never had any love from his family. They've never told him that he loves him. They hate him. And at one point, they do see the mother at the hospital, and the mother's waiting outside. And when the three boys walk by, she says, "This is your fault. How could you get my boy into this?" And all this stuff. She starts talking about him. Even though her boy is right in there and he's about to die, she's like, it's like he's in trouble. And they say to her, no wonder he never went home, right? This is your fault. And it just, it's pretty profound. So Kristen says, "I got preoccupied with Christmas decorations, but I've been listening." Shouts out to you, Kristen, putting up those Christmas decorations. Put that angel on the top of that tree. So he says, I want to go through some of the imagery in the book and some of the symbolism. On page 47, he said, the speaker says here, Ponyboy says, "Johnny and I stretched out on our backs and looked at the stars. I was freezing. It was a cold night, and all I had was that sweatshirt, but I could watch stars in sub-zero weather. I saw Johnny's cigarette glowing in the dark and wondered vaguely what it was like inside a burning ember." That's truly amazing, because that symbol will recur at the end, obviously, because they will be inside a burning ember, literally, when they're inside the burning church, right? So, but also, his life is a kind of burning ember. I mean, it's like, the cliche about the candle burning at both ends, or like a cigarette burning out quickly. Their lives are obviously people think of them as, they're going to live fast, die young, and leave a beautiful corpse. They're all good looking but they're dangerous and reckless, but they actually aren't. They aren't reckless. They are reckless in a number of ways, and they're reckless in the way that teenagers are, and they get in these deadly fights, but they are not reckless in terms of the things that they value. and the things that they value are truly important, right? And they are solid to each other, even though they fight amongst themselves as well. But the way they fight amongst themselves is kind of, it's dudes being dudes, and they're not afraid to defend themselves and like throw a punch if their friend disses them, but they're not going to hold it against them forever. They love each other. And Johnny says at the bottom of that page, I can't take much more. Johnny spoke of my own feelings. I'll K myself or something. Don't, I said, sitting up an alarm. You can't do that to yourself, Johnny. So it's amazing because this still happens now, but these kids are really young, right? And it's always shocking to people when you hear that, young teenagers can say this kind of thing, right? How can they say this thing? But this book shows you that, like, this isn't like necessarily a new phenomenon, and that they are perfectly capable of understanding their situation and the place in the world and their desperation. They are truly desperate. But what's amazing is the redemptive aspect, that even though Johnny dies, right, he says at one point, when he's in the hospital, he's like, when I said that stuff about, offing myself, I don't mean it now. I want to live. Life is beautiful, and I want to live. And that shows that he values life. He has this will to live. It shows that he values life enough to disregard his own life and his own safety for the lives of even younger kids who are burning inside of a burnout, an empty church, right? And obviously, the fact that they find sanctuary. I mean, the fact that they find sanctuary in this church is a potent symbol of the fact that they are looking for meaning, and that they are looking for meaning, and they want to find redemption and salvation in God. That nobody in their life has ever taken them to church. No one in their life has ever done things for them. And so they're going to have to make it their own way, and they do the best that they can. I also found it interesting about the blue Mustang as a symbol in the book. The blue Mustang is the symbol of the Socs, and it's like a shark that they see, kind of like preying on them in the neighborhood, and that we've discussed that as a symbol before on this channel. Remember, we did the Joyce Carol Oates short story, Where Have You Going? Where Are You Going? Where Have You Been? Where the blue Mustang, the blue car, plays a point in that. It's it's kind of Lucifer's chariot within that book. The other thing is the literary symbolism in the book is important because there are two books that are brought up in this. One is Gone with the Wind, Margaret Mitchell's Gone with the Wind, which is like the only book that Johnny knows. And when they get their money from Dally, and they go buy supplies, they go buy bologna, and food to last them, and they do the best they can, and they get this awful food. They eat the same thing for a week or whatever, but they're subsisting and they're living. They get some cigs, and they get a book because they have to, feed their soul. And Ponyboy only makes it to one point in the book, and he decides at the end of the book, he decides that, he can go on with it and read the whole story, kind of like he can tell the whole story of Johnny's life. But he loves the fact that in Gone with the Wind, he's reading about the Southerners, the Southern cavalry officers who are diving into a cavalry charge, about to die. And he says that, basically that, everyone in history will decide that they are the losers because they lose, right? They lose the war. But that they have something more potent and more powerful than anyone else, which is gallantry. And at the end of the book, he says Johnny died gallant, right? He had nothing. He was poor. He had essentially no future, no family, but he had us, and he threw it away on purpose in order to gain something bigger, right? He received by giving, and he gave these other kids that were going to die their life, and that was gallant. And I love how it's described in the book because it's like this. It's a new concept and a new word that he'd never heard before, and it's more than just honor. And I think that is. I don't want to say it's a lesson, right? But it is something that is revelatory for an adult reading the book because this is a concept that is around and that everyone's aware of, and that is powerful enough to be thrown away by the people who don't care about such things, right? Who are uninterested in anything like honor or gallantry. And then, of course, the other literary allusion is Robert Frost. I mean, this plays a direct role in the book, and this is really powerful. Now, we've talked about Robert Frost. We did our Frost was a psychotic poet stream before. But the way that the poem is used in the book is remarkable because, again, this is Nothing Gold Can Stay by Robert Frost, and it is perfect for symbolizing the way that these two characters are, and really the way that all of the characters are. Shouts out to our homeboy TGF out there. Everybody give TGF some love. We love you, TGF. Nick, appreciate you. Thanks for being here, homeboy. We love you. We pray for you. And the poem is elementary enough in terms of it is simple. It is simple, but it's not simplistic, right? And the diction in the poem itself is, never goes beyond a disyllabic word. It's not hard to grasp. I'd say the most difficult word in the poem is subside. But it's not moralistic or including some kind of a fable lesson, but it does stand for meaning in terms of, I'd say the poem never meant more than it does in this book, The Outsiders. And, of course, it goes, nature's first green is gold, her hardest hue to hold. Her early leaf's a flower, but only so an hour. Then leaf subsides to leaf, so Eden sank to grief. So dawn goes down to day, nothing gold can stay. So it gives me chills thinking about what this means in the book because, of course, those are Johnny's last words. Johnny says that he doesn't understand the poem, and Ponyboy tries to explain to him that gold stands for the brilliance and the light of innocence in life, which is what they are supposed to have, right? They are supposed to have this, but they don't. Especially Johnny, because Johnny grieves over the fact that he has taken the life of another person who he says could have gone on to live and had potential. And he never knew what that boy was thinking, but he had to do it because he was trying to kill you. And I had to defend you. You're my friend, right? But he still grieves for the life of this person. He's not psychotic. He's not cold. He's damaged, but he wants the gold in life in terms of he wants his first green, his youth, right, to turn into the gold light, right? The light that through the green fuse drops the flower, says Dylan Thomas. He wants to experience love. He wants love, right? And the fact that Eden sank to grief shows that they live in a fallen world, they live in a fallen state, and that's never more apparent than the way that they themselves live in the narrative. Dawn goes down to day, and nothing gold can stay. And then, of course, at the end, his last words are to his friend Ponyboy, and he tells him, "Stay gold, Ponyboy." And now, that is like so unbelievably powerful and brilliant that, of course, it becomes a joke in terms of like, it becomes it's so famous that it becomes a cliche. But it's like, what I mean by joke is that, one of the defense mechanisms that we all have, and this is perfectly fine, is that we take the serious things and we make them into jokes. We make them into humor because that's our way of understanding ourselves as humans and to keep living, right? But it is not a joke, and that's fine to quote. Obviously, it's fine to quote the movie and to make that a kind of a symbolic cliche in terms of other works of literature and other films. Or we see those words all the time. But it's not a joke in terms of what it means, and especially what it means in here, because it's his friend's last words. Right. And the last words are so perfect because in that instant, Johnny is giving himself to his best friend. He's already done that once, but he did it by taking away the life of somebody else because he had to. Then he gives his life for these other kids. And now he's giving his life for his best friend. In a metaphysical sense, he's telling him to live his life, right? To seek truth and meaning in self, to look for the brilliance of life, to look, to give yourself in love, and to be loved, because he loves him. And I think that's just, it's really incredible. And just on pages 77 and 78, Johnny's is when he first reads the poem in the church. He even mentions later on. He says we became closer in that church than anybody could come. Like we were as close as two friends could be. Right? They were running from the law after something heinous. They didn't know what their future was, but they found. They were already friends, but they found true friendship in each other. Where'd you learn that? That was what I meant. Robert Frost wrote it. He meant more to it than I'm getting, though. I was trying to find the meaning the poet had in mind, but it eluded me. I always remembered it because I never quite got what he meant by it. Johnny said slowly, I never noticed colors and clouds and stuff until you kept reminding me about them. It seems like they were never there before. He thought for a minute. Your family sure is funny. And what happens to be so funny about it? I asked. Johnny looked at me quickly. I didn't mean nothing. I meant, well, Soda kind of looks like your mother did, but he acts just exactly like your father. And Derry is the spitting image of your father, but he ain't wild and laughing all the time like he was. He acts like your mother. And you don't act like either one. I said, thinking this over, you ain't like any of the gang. I mean, I couldn't tell Two-Bit or Steve or even Derry about the sunrise and clouds and stuff. I couldn't even remember that poem around them. I mean, they just don't dig. Just you and Soda Pop and maybe Cherry Valance. Yeah, I guess we're different. Maybe they are, they say. Wow. Right? We're different. Actually, maybe it's they who are different. Page 79, on the fifth day, I read up to Sherman's siege of Atlanta and Gone with the Wind. Owed Johnny $150 from poker games, smoked 2 packs of Camels, and as Johnny had predicted, got sick. I hadn't eaten anything all day, and smoking on an empty stomach makes you feel real great. I curled up in the corner to sleep off the smoke. I was just about asleep when I heard, as if from a great distance, a low, long whistle that went out in a sudden high note. I was too sleepy to pay any attention, although Johnny didn't have any reason to be whistling like that. He was sitting on the back steps trying to read Gone with the Wind. I'd almost decided that I dreamed the outside world and there was nothing real but bologna sandwiches and the Civil War and the old church and the mist in the valley. It seemed to me that I'd always lived in the church, or maybe lived during the Civil War and it somehow got transplanted. That shows you what a wild imagination I have. So brilliant. Because he's saying here that maybe I'd always lived in this place, right? And the fact that he qualifies it and tempers it with what a wild imagination I have is honest. It's honest and true because he doesn't know how he feels. He doesn't know his feelings. He doesn't know like how to discern and decipher what he's feeling, but he does know enough to know that this is like this moment, even though it's the worst moment of their lives, is also the best moment in their lives. And like he was always meant to be in this church, right? With his best friend. They're reading literature and they're looking at the sky and he's thinking about his future. And another part that I want to get to is when they save the kids and they get a ride from this guy, and the guy says, "I swear you three are the bravest kids I've seen in a long time. First you and the black-haired kid climbing in that window, and then the tough-looking kid going back in to save him. Mrs. O'Brien and I think you were sent straight from heaven. Or are you just professional heroes or something? Sent from heaven? Had he gotten a good look at Dallas? No, we're greasers. I was too worried and scared to appreciate the fact that he was trying to be funny. He's not trying to be funny. This guy's not trying to be funny. He's real. He's being sincere here. These are the angels with dirty faces, right? They do something incredibly gallant and brave and amazing, where they're willing to give their lives for somebody they've never met. On pages 116 and 117, we get one of the most revelatory passages, which is where they're talking about to their enemy. And he says, I'm sick of all this, sick and tired. This is the guy, this is the equivalent, this is like the mirror of Pony Boy, because this is this guy Bob. And Bob, it's Bob's friend. Bob is the guy who died, who was trying to kill Pony Boy and was killed by Johnny. So it's like 2 verses 2. And then he says, I'm sick of all this, sick and tired. Bob was a good guy. He was the best buddy a guy ever had. I mean, he was a good fighter and tough and everything, but he was a real person too, you dig? I nodded. He's dead. His mother has had a nervous breakdown. They spoiled him rotten. I mean, most parents would be proud of a kid like that, good looking and smart and everything, but they gave in to him all the time. He kept trying to make someone say no, and they never did. They never did. That was what he wanted, for somebody to tell him no, to have somebody lay down the law, set the limits, give him something solid to stand on. That's what we all want, really, one time. So do you get how amazing that is? I think probably most of us don't consider that. We don't remember what it was like being a teenager in terms of, especially if you were ever a teenager and you felt like adults didn't understand you, or the world didn't understand you, and that's a common thing for teenagers to feel, I know, but I mean it in a really deep sense, and to feel like you were an outsider in terms of any kind of situation, right? And, like you didn't belong or whatever. And that can be a small thing or a big thing. But it's pretty universal to teenagers, because they're, you're trying to figure out where you are in the world. But what is on a completely different level is the fact that being a teenager, I think a lot of times you want to rebel against the fact that there are too many rules, right? People won't let you do what you want to do, right? Like let's say you were a teenager and you had a curfew. Let's say your parents made you come home at 11, right? But all your other friends got to stay out all night. Well, now you can see that as a grown-up looking back, you can see that what you didn't understand was that what you really craved, what you really wanted more than anything, was structure. And even if you had too much structure, right, sometimes you wanted freedom, but you want as a teenager for people to tell you no, because there are limits, because there's a kind of a safety in that. Number one, obviously it sets who you are as a human being and as an adult, and that you need the power. I mean, look, most adults we know probably don't know how to say no in terms of any situation, right? Somebody asks you for something and you want to equivocate or make up an excuse instead of just saying a hard no because you're being polite or whatever it is. But the strength to say no is powerful, right? It empowers you, because it means that you know your own limits, you know who you are, you know the difference between right and wrong. And that teenagers they can't really understand that, but they understand it in a way that they can't vocalize. And that this kid had everything in the world, and his parents were so lenient with him that all he did was search for somebody to tell him to stop. Now, this is I mean, this is a stretch, what I'm about to say, but it is interesting that we find this same thing in an extreme way. If we take this to the extreme, we find this same sort of thing in what we've heard and what we've read about serial killers. Okay, now I'm not drawing a correlation between the two, but I'm saying that in this sense, that one thing that we often find in the accounts of serial killers is that they would keep doing their horrendous deeds because they are exploring their absolute freedom in terms of their most base desires, their most satanic base desires, because no one would say no, no one would catch them, right? And that going back to what happens in the book, this kid is trying to kill another kid for no reason. They're driving around in this blue Mustang. They see these two kids, and he's trying to kill him. And so this is like the perfect example of somebody trying to uplift themselves by stepping on someone else instead of trying to uplift other people. The reason the book is complex is because it doesn't just stop at that. They go on and have the fight. So they do things that they don't want to do, even though in their personal code, they realize that it's right. And of course, their fight doesn't involve weapons. It's just them fist fighting, and they make a note of that. They say, like, look, nobody ever gets killed in the rumbles, right? They're just fighting, and that is in a way a good simulation for the war games that will occur later in life in terms of the corporate world or the small wars with neighbors in terms of arguments or all the little things that happen in life. I mean, aren't games are natural. We see animals, they play games with each other. They roughhouse. Animals do this. I'm not saying human beings are animals. I'm saying animals do this in the natural world, and little kids do this. And then when you grow up, I mean, in Arthurian literature and in the medieval world, this is why they had games. This is why they had jousting tournaments, because they were a replacement for wartime. So they are a preparation for wartime while the world is at peace. And that is essentially what, that's what sports are supposed to simulate. Yes, they also unite people and they can do all that sort of thing. But they are essentially, the World Cup's on right now, and it's like, instead of having a world war, which is actually happening all the time, you have countries pitted against one another and vying for territory, right? It's not territory with soccer, it is with football. That's more of a territorial game because it's yard by yard, right? But you're searching for the ultimate goal. That's what games kind of are. I'm not saying that's all they are, and that's probably pretty simplistic, but they do function symbolically as a simulation for this sort of thing. And that's what happens in the book, except there is actual fighting. On page 118, he says something revelatory. You want to see a movie before we go see Johnny in Dallas? Nope, I said, lighting up another cigarette. I still had a headache, and I felt better. Socias were just guys after all. Things were rough all over, but it was better that way. That way you could tell the other guy was human too. So in other words, what we learn is that this dialectic that's kind of happened naturally in terms of their societal structure, the poor versus the rich and all that stuff, it's also been thrust upon them, as Shakespeare says, right? And we can see that the other guys, they've learned at a young age that the other guys are also human. They're not inhuman. They're not subhuman. They're not a faceless enemy. They're people just like us that have motivations. And so maybe there can be some kind of way around the fighting. And if there's not, at least we can recognize the humanity in the other people. On page 120 and 121, Johnny almost grinned as he nodded, tough enough as he managed. But by the way, his eyes were glowing. I figured Southern gentlemen had nothing on Johnny Cade. You want to know something, Pony Boy? I'm scared stiff. I used to talk about offing myself. He drew a quivering breath. I don't want to die now. I ain't long enough. 16 years ain't long enough. I wouldn't mind it so much if there wasn't so much stuff I ain't done yet and so many things I ain't seen. It's not fair. You know what? That time we were in Windricksville was the only time I've been away from our neighborhood. Johnny Cake's eyes were fearful and sensitive. Hers were cheap and hard. As we passed her, she was saying, but I have a right to see him. He's my son. After all the trouble his father and I have gone to raise him, this is our reward. Two Bit's eyes got narrow, and I was afraid he was going to start something. I don't like to hear women get sworn at, even if they deserve it. No wonder he hates your guts, Two Bit snapped. Good for him. Good for you. And then, of course, Dallas. Dallas has died on page 152. And Ponyboy says, he says, Dallas is gone. He ran out like the devil was after him. He's going to blow up. He couldn't take it. How can I take it? I wondered. Dally is tougher than I am. Why can I take it when Dally can't? And then I knew Johnny was the only thing Dally loved, and now Johnny was gone. Which shows you that Dally, who is, again, this hard-bitten, tough, thief, POS, right? Especially in the eyes of the law and the adults and school and all this stuff, is actually a virtuous character, right? Who has yet to realize his potential, but knows enough because he feels. All he does is feel, but he knows that he loves his friend more than anything, right? He loves him, and he cannot stand that he's not going to be around anymore. These guys are so loyal to each other. I mean, who amongst us, right, could have just, maybe you're lucky and blessed to have one friend who's like this, right? But, you get the feeling that the socias may be the same. They may be the same. They may be drawn together in terms of their friend. They probably are. But we do know that they have virtue enough, even though they're the bad guys in the book, but they're the good guys in society, that they are virtuous enough to admit what they've done, and they don't have him prosecuted. They don't have, they don't lie, right? None of these guys lie. They are not corrupted by the stench of lies. They do all these things, and look, Johnny was a thief, but there was also a good thief, right? You remember the good thief, and maybe that could be Johnny. I don't know. In terms of trauma, pages 170 and 171, I'm hesitant to call it that because it seems like such a cheap word. It seems like just such a cheap word for the thing itself. Right? How can you sum up these experiences in words? Well, we have to, because that's what we do. We think in words and we use words. We dream and we think in words. The dialogue in our own head is with words. Words mean something. So we're going to call it that. Page 170. People I knew wouldn't talk to me, and people I didn't know would come right up and ask about the whole mess. Sometimes even teachers. My history teacher, she acted as if she was scared of me, even though I'd never caused any trouble in her class. You can bet that made me feel real tough. T-U-F-F, tough. He says, I wasn't scared. It was the oddest feeling in the world. I didn't feel anything, scared, mad, or anything, just zero. And that's really where Ponyboy on his journey of self-discovery, his rite of passage, really is truly at his lowest, right? When there's the realization that he doesn't feel anything. That's the most dangerous thing. Because remember, they did survive on feelings, and now he doesn't feel anything. And that would be something that would be, if gone uncorrected, would end him up like Bob, right? Or even worse, if Bob had killed Johnny. But luckily, he's blessed with these two older brothers who take care of him like, they're proxy parents for his parents who have been taken away from him. They're gone, and they correct him. So he has structure. He has the structure that he craved. And he says, let's see, on page 172. He gets threatened by these guys, and he breaks a glass, and he threatens to, slice the guy up with the glass. But then afterwards, after the guy leaves, he starts picking up the shattered glass out of the dirt, which is a sign of humility, right? It's a symbol of his humbling himself. And the shattered glass, as we've discussed so many times, is obviously an outer symbol of his shattered psyche. And now he's trying to put the pieces back together. I just went on picking up the glass from the bottle end, and I put it in the trash can. He starts off his essay with the names of his friends. Daryl Shane Curtis Jr., Soda Patrick Curtis, Ponyboy Michael Curtis. Then I drew horses all over it. That was going to get a good grade, like all get out. And it's interesting that he draws horses because he talked earlier about the horses as the horses were a symbol of kind of purity and innocence. But it's interesting that they're horses and that he's Ponyboy, right? And that's his real name also. That's his birth name. It's on his birth certificate. On page 173, Soda says to him, his older brother, "You're not going to drop out. Listen, with your brains and grades, you could get a scholarship and we could put you through college. But schoolwork's not the point. You're living in a vacuum, Pony, and you're going to have to cut it out. Johnny and Dallas were our buddies too, but you don't just stop living because you lose someone. I thought you knew that by now. You don't quit. And anytime you don't like the way I'm running things, you can get out." Damn. Maybe I should end it with that because that really, I don't know about you, but that like really hits me hard. Because he's got this older brother who's midway between his age and Derry's age, and he has a skill, right? He works. He has a skill. He's good looking. He works in the. He's a mechanic, and he works on cars. But he doesn't seem to have. He doesn't have an academic mind. He doesn't have an analytical mind like Ponyboy does. But he has something incredible, which is the ability to be responsible and to love and to give structure. Even at like 17 years old, right? He tells his brother, "You're living in a vacuum." How amazing is that? I mean, I don't know if we would think of that when we're 17 years old. And this was written by a 15-year-old. And to say that life goes on, we've all lost people. We've all lost, but you got to keep living. You just got to keep living, man. Livin, right? But you got to keep living. You can't get consumed by this and follow them. You got to make something better and use the things that they gave. You got to use what Johnny gave you, and stay gold. Keep your sense of innocence. Keep your, Sam Hyde says, your sense of childlike wonder, right? And then at the end of the book, I'll say that the last words in the book, this is great. He says, "And I decided I could tell people, beginning with my English teacher. I wondered for a long time how to start that theme, how to start writing about something that it was important to me. And I finally began like this. When I stepped out into the bright sunlight from the darkness of the movie house, I had only two things on my mind, Paul Newman and a ride home." It's great. The book ends where it begins, but it is the beginning of the rest of his life. It's the beginning of a new world. It's the beginning of all of the things that he's gone through in like just 3 weeks, like 3 weeks time in this whole book. It's Shakespearean in that sense. Shakespeare plays with the Aristotelian ideas of tragedy and kind of he breaks the rules sometimes, which is okay. He has artistic license, but it's like the events in the play are supposed to take place within the life of the production of the play, but or at least within one day. But with Shakespeare, he often extends that because life is bigger than that. And that's what happens in the book. It feels like so much has happened, but it's only been 3 weeks. And this is the most that has happened in his life. There's been so much that's happened. But that's also reflective of reality. You think back on your own life, and probably the most profound things are so, the events that changed you, especially like losing someone, are so quick. That's the shock of life, right? That you're living this life with other people, And one minute they're there and the next minute they're gone. And then you have to try and fight the living in a vacuum where you're consumed by this. You can be consumed by it, but you got to keep going. Right? And I think that's the most amazing thing about the book. I mean, so I know we didn't exactly do an objective analysis of the book, but that's okay. We're not supposed to. We're supposed to feel something. We can't, I don't know. We have to, if you don't read literature or watch movies or whatever and feel something, not just with your brain, but like in your heart, then, what's the point? It can't be a great book. It can't be something great in the canon. It has to be something about life, and not life in terms of like it's a moralistic tale or it's a fable where it's simplistic like that. And where it's didactic. It's like, no, this is something that appeals to everyone. It's archetypal, right? It has a metaphysical purpose. So that's The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton, and I'm really glad that I read that. I mean, like I said, it was a really tough read in terms of trying to process all the stuff in the book. But oftentimes, the works that we read, as kids will do that. That's one reason why they still exist, why they continue to make an impact on us, even as adults, because they are, it's almost a trick. It's almost some sort of illusory, like a mirage, how things can look so simple but be so profound. Kind of like our own lives, our own, you think about our own childhood, and it's such a quick time in your life, but it has all of the things that will continue to affect you afterwards. So shouts out to all my friends out there. Shouts out to Mixky out there, Tech Noir Graphics. Shouts out to Jethro, all my homies, TGF. Shouts out to Rachel. I love you out there, everybody. We pray for you, Rachel, and the whole Wilson family. We love you guys. Like I said, I will be back with our homeboy Church of the Eternal Logos, David Patrick Harry, I think tomorrow night. Shouts out to JD, of course. I'll be on Jay's channel next week. Hopefully we'll see Rachel and Jamie together again doing an analysis and soon. And let's see if we got any. Let's see about the super chats here. See if we got any super chats. Oh, we did. Look at that. Thanks to our homeboy TGF out there, Nick, who drops $10 via PayPal. Thank you so much for supporting me. I really appreciate you. Shouts out also to Jason out there. Posh's Whiteboard, who supported me last time. I think I didn't get to it. So shouts out to Jason. Thank you so much for supporting me. Let's look at... Oh, here we go. Shouts out to Pim for that $5 super chat for the Christmas snack fund. Thank you so much, Pim. I really appreciate that, and I really can use that because you guys can use your support right now, especially getting to me directly through because there's like a month or 2 month delay with super chats. So I really appreciate you out there, everybody, supporting me, dropping me those links. Clicking those links and supporting me. I really could use it. Shouts out to Toledo, who drops, our homegirl Toledo out there, beautiful Toledo, who drops 10 Kiwi bucks and says, Merry Christmas, BLA, for the book fund. This book holds a close place in my heart. I lost my brother. He was 15 in a fight. Stupid teenage angst. This stuff does happen. This book is a masterpiece. Well, Toledo, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Thank you for sharing that with me and with us. And I pray for you and your family and your brother. And thank you so much. And I'm glad this meant something to you. And thank you so much. That was really beautiful of you to do. So that's awesome. Thank you. Let's see if we got any other super chats. I think that might be it. So again, if you want to sponsor a stream, you can drop $100. If you want me to do a book, I will dedicate myself to it. I mean, I did do that anyway, but I will dedicate myself to give me a list of things that you want me to cover. If you want me to do a film, drop me $50. Do that please via PayPal or Cash App or Venmo. And we have a couple coming up. We're going to do the novelization of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and the film. We're also going to do a Face in the Crowd. We're going to do William Faulkner when I get down south in a couple weeks. Again, please support me because I gotta get the gas money to get down there, y'all. Come on now. And so if you want me to do that, that would be great. Or you can just send a donation or whatever. And I really would appreciate that. Also, you can support me. This is also really helpful just by sharing the stream on anything, telling your friends or family about it. Tell them to just hit that sub button. I know it's hard for people, and I'm saying this genuinely. I know it's hard for people to hit that sub button, especially if they don't have a YouTube account. I mean, people they have a hard time doing that, or they just don't want to, or they put it off. But it sure does help. It sure does help me and helps promote the channel and promote the algorithm. So tell them to hit that subscribe button. Tell them to come here for the live chats and hang out with us. And I will be back soon with one of those. I've also got a couple other books I'm going to do. And, of course, I talked about we're going to be back with DPH tomorrow night. So thank y'all. And I will see you. Soon. And I'll see you again, of course, in Jay's chat tonight. He's got his stream going on. So that's about all I got, you guys. I hope everyone has a Merry Christmas. So you're having a great Christmas season, a good December. And we're going to roll into the new year hard here. We're going to roll into the new year. We some cold-ass riders here, okay? We're going to roll into it strong. And we're going to make next year a great year, okay? So that's about all I got. Thank y'all. I love you. Stay gold. Peace.